All right, Mindy, be nice to the kids. Should I said JoJo, be nice to Mindy? No. Yeah, JoJo does well. When I had him when we did the thing up here, he was like an angel. Oh goodness! All right. So today's lesson, I know I sent it out to in advance. Well, I sent the title out in advance. Let me put it that way. And the title of it is "Faith That Caused Something." And I'm gonna be honest with y'all, and I'm already starting. This is probably gonna be one of the hardest lessons I've ever had to teach. I've been thinking about it a lot this week, and I think besides doing Dad's farewell lesson at the very last minute that I had to do, this has been one of the harder ones to prepare for, because I don't know if we're truly prepared for a lot of what happened this week. Me and Helen were talking about it, and some others were talking about it, and it almost kind of felt like how we did after 9/11, a little bit, for those who were old enough to remember that. And it's just kind of, I don't know, odd that it happened one day before. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm talking about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And regardless of what you thought of him from a political standpoint, I didn't agree with everything he said. I didn't agree with everything he did. But there was no doubt the one thing that he was a dedicated servant of the Lord. And his faith was something that I think we all should probably strive for. And so I thought a lot about that this week, after seeing everything that happened and watching everything that happened. And I know many of us, it's not something you see every day, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, is seeing someone assassinated in public. And the world we live in, the world we live in, everyone has phones, everyone has cameras, everyone has, everything's live streamed 24/7, it seems like. And so I think in the past, when we've heard of things, it's hit hard, but to see it happen, it is just something I don't think we are, as humans, designed to see and experience. And so I've done a ton of soul searching over the last couple of days, a lot. And the question that keeps coming into my mind, and this is part of the reason why I came up with the title here, Faith That Caused Something, is, am I the Christian that I'm supposed to be? And the more I thought about it, the more I've watched and I've studied and I've read the Bible. The thing that I've realized is, no, I'm not. And so it makes me wonder, well, if I'm not the Christian I'm supposed to be as the preacher, the pastor of the church, then how about the people who are going to church with me? Like, are we being the Christians that we're supposed to be? And so I said, and when I sent the message out this Sunday, I said, I'm going to be stepping on my own toes. I'm preaching, I'm teaching to Chad today. And so if I stomp on your toes because I'm stomping on mine, and I'm sorry. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm not sorry. Because we probably need it. And I know I need it. And I'm hoping that this will be a lesson that really speaks to you, because I'm hoping it speaks to me. But I asked the question, am I being the father, or the Christian I'm supposed to be? And the question is no. And I'm not being the husband I'm supposed to be. And I'm not being the father I'm supposed to be. And not being the son that I'm supposed to be, etc. I can go all the way out. And I can look at those things, because those are the questions that keep running through my mind. And my other thing was, are you really willing to stand up for Jesus and teach Jesus boldly? Right? It's easy to get up here and speak Jesus to a bunch of people who are already Christians. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. Y'all are nice people. Y'all are wonderful people. It's easy to come in here every Sunday and it's Jesus to you all. Y'all make it enjoyable, and I enjoy it. But while our faith is supposed to be enjoyable, it's not supposed to be easy. And I think for so many of us, our faith and our Christianity has become easy. You know, one of the things that I've kind of made excuses of, well, we need to be softer, we need to be quieter, we need to be more attractional, we need to be more, whatever, to attract people, to bring people in, to do blah, blah. And I look back, and I've tried to do that a lot, is look at Jesus and how was he towards me? And he had this perfect balance of soft but at the same time harsh. And we're going to see some of that today. And so as sorry, someone was calling the church. As I go through this, looking at this title of faith that costs something, I want you to ask yourself, has your faith really cost you anything? And I mean truly cost you anything. In the sense of, we see a lot of times an inconvenience in our faith as something costing us something, right? My quote and the thing that came to my mind was, in America we have a faith of inconvenience, not sacrifice. Right? A lot of times our faith is inconvenient to things we want to do. Right? It's inconvenient to how we want to be. It gets in the way of some of the stuff that we want to do. But is our faith truly sacrificial? Are we sacrificing for our faith? And my answer is really no. Right? I've given up some things, some inconveniences. But truthfully, if I look at it, and I look at my faith, is it really costing me anything? And I'm going to show you why I'm asking this and what I'm comparing it to as we go through this. So our main text for today is going to be Luke 9:23, Luke 14:25 and 23. We're going to go through a little bit of scripture today, more than we typically do, just because I think it's important to hit on all these. But looking at this, right? Luke 9:23. And so this is Jesus talking to the crowd, and he's calling his people. And he says, if anyone wants to be my follower, right? Now, in most versions, I teach out of the New Living Translations, but most versions say disciple. Disciple literally means follow. He says, you must give up what? Your own way. Not give up a little bit of things and follow me, but give up your own way. Take up your cross daily and follow me. We're going to go deeper into this verse a little bit more as we get into this, but I want y'all to understand that when he was talking to this crowd, they knew what he was saying. And I think sometimes we don't understand it. And so he kind of goes along this same vein in Luke 14 later on. He says a large crowd was following Jesus. He turned around and said to them, so he had this large group of people following him. He just turns around. And these were his disciples. He says, if you want to be my disciple, you must, by comparison, hate everyone else. Now, the Greek translation for this is to love less. Doesn't literally mean we need to hate anyone, but it is to love less. Basically, you've got to love Jesus first. Your father, your mother, wife, children, brothers, and sisters. Yes. It's not want to work for me today. Even your own life. How many of us love less our own lives? than Jesus. He says, otherwise you cannot be my disciple. He says, if you can't do these things right here, then you can't be my disciple. And he says, if you don't carry your own cross, like we just talked about, and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. But this is the important thing, and this is where I want us to look at today. Verse 28, but don't begin until you count the cost. How many of us have really, when we started our Christian walk, counted the cost before we started it? I know this is something I've talked about before. We fail as Christians when we convert people because we kind of give them the timeshare version, introduction into Christ of what Christ, what follow. Oh, it's great, it's wonderful. You give your life to Christ, and everything's your money's going to roll in. Blah blah blah, all this stuff, right? Like, oh, it'd be wonderful. Now Jesus is like, no, if you want to follow me, you got to be willing to die every single day. Now, how many times have any of us, before we were converted to Christianity, said, hey, you've got to be willing to die to Christ before before we're going to take this confession, before we're going to put you in the waters of baptism, you've got to really commit. That's what Jesus did. He was like, look, if you're going to follow me, you better count the cost here. Understand what you're doing. And he goes on, he says, for who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there's enough money to finish it? You ever watch someone build a building, build a house, without understanding how much it's going to cost? A business? How many of us have seen houses or half-built businesses on the side of the road because they didn't? He says in verse 33, so you cannot become my disciple without giving up everything you own. Salt is good for seasoning, but if it loses its flavor, how do you make it salty again? And he's talking about our Christian walk in this last verse, and it hit me a little bit different when I was pulling this one up. Flavorless salt is good neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown away. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand. So he's saying if you don't count the cost and you can't give up everything, he says you're not worth being thrown on manure pile. I don't know. Maybe these verses just hit me different this week because of everything going on. I don't know. But I think we have to understand what Jesus was saying here when he says, if you're going to follow me, you better take it serious. You better count what it's going to cost you and see if you're really willing to give it up and sacrifice it. Because here's the fact. A faith that costs nothing is worth nothing. Go ahead, Kyle. That's a very good point. And that's the thing, is it's count all the cost, right? When you build a building, you don't just count the cost of the the main structure in the concrete, right? A lot of times it's the little things, the little tiny things that add up. The nut, the screws and the bolts, and those can get expensive too, right? And so when we're counting these costs of what we're doing, we've got to make sure that we truly understand what we're diving into and what we're getting ourselves into. Because again, a faith that costs nothing is worth it. And so my question is what did our salvation, our faith cost? What did it cost you? I honestly, I sit back and I think of, what is my faith? What does it cost me? And I really couldn't think of anything like hard. So like Kyle said, and I'm not dismissing these things because I understand that these things can be struggles. But yeah, maybe I gave up. I don't know. I didn't give up a lot because I was born and raised in the church, y'all. So if I'm being honest, it was, I've kind of been there from day one. But I guess there's a lot of things that I was different in high school, right? Got made fun of a little bit. I've tried to stand firm on a lot of things, and it's cost me some friendships, and it's cost me some different things. But if I really look at it, like, what does it really cost me? Okay, someone doesn't like me. I'm not trying to be insympathetic or whatever word I want to use there, but okay, so if someone doesn't like you, and you all these things, it's like, but has it really cost me anything? And I try to think of, like, what has it cost me? I work hard, for what we do here. I work hard at work, but I don't know if that's really a cost. That's something we're told to do. We're supposed to work hard no matter what. And I look at the early followers of the faith, and I'm like, and it cost them something. And most of them, almost all of them, except for one, it cost them their lives. It was. And no, I yeah, and I agree with that. We do. We live in a completely different time. And so here's you went ahead of me a little bit on this. No, you're fine. This segues perfect into, okay. So what are you sacrificing? And I'm not talking about just your life. Like, what are you truly sacrificing? What is Chad truly sacrificing in order to be a follower of Christ? And that's where I'm asked to ask my question. And it's like, when I look back at it, I'm not really sacrificing. There's a whole lot more that Chad could be sacrificing to be a follower of Christ. And so, Kyle, go ahead. Yeah. Right. Because If you go back to that and look, I mean, we really are, as a church in America, the guy that's given the most talents, right? If you look at, we're not the one who got one talent, right? We're the one who got was it 10? 10 talents, 10, 5, and 1, right? The 10 talents. We are abundantly blessed. We are spoiled as Christians. And I don't mean that in a mean, harsh way. The truth is we are spoiled as Christians in this country. And that's where I say, like, what is it costing? We've been given, to use that example, we've been given the 10 talents. What are we doing with those 10? Are we sitting on them? Like the one guy with the 1? Or are we doubling those? And so this gives me to James 2. And I know we all know this verse. James 2, verses 14 through 7. What good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see a brother or sister who has no food or clothing, and you say, goodbye and have a good day. Stay warm, eat well. I'm praying for you. Right? But then you don't give them that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? So you see, faith by itself isn't enough unless it produces good deeds. It is dead and useless. And I'm going to be honest with you, and maybe I'm being a little harsh on myself, but I feel like a lot of times we have this faith without a lot of action, without a lot of works. We say a lot of these things right here, right? Have a good day. We say them differently. We say, I'm praying for you. We say, if there's anything I can do, let me know, knowing full well that they're not going to get a hold of you and let you know that you're doing it, that they need anything. When it should be, we see someone suffering, we should show up at their house whether they want us there or not. We should be there helping them out. I'm going to be honest with you, and Miss Connie, I hope that you don't mind me using you as an example. I've said a lot of prayers for her. I've told people, I'm praying for her. I haven't been over to her house. I haven't come down here and visit with her and said, hey, how are you doing? Just spending time, seeing if you need anything. I say a lot, right? I send a text message. How hard is it to send a text message? It takes 5 seconds. And so we're called, and I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not coming down on people who are kind and pray for people. We need to be praying for people, right? But it goes beyond, that's what James is saying here. It goes beyond, hope you have a wonderful day, I'm praying for you, and then moving on. It's got to be a faith of action, of action. Matthew 7, and this is a scary verse to me, and it's become scarier the more I've read it. Matthew 7, 21 to 23, not everyone who calls on to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who actually do the will of my Father in heaven will enter. On Judgment Day, there will be many people who said, Lord, Lord, we prophesied. Basically, these are the preachers. These are people saying, we preached in your name. We prophesied in your name. We taught in your name. People cast out demons. And I've fought demons in your name. Performed many miracles in your name. You think, man, if anyone's going to get into heaven, it's the ones who are preaching and the ones who are going out and fighting the demons in the world and the ones who are going around healing people and taking care of people and doing that. And what do you say? But I will reply, I never knew you. Get away from me, you who breaks God's law. And so we've got to be very careful to not get caught up in a faith of, yeah, I have faith in Jesus without a lot of action behind it. James says faith without works is dead. It's nothing. It is useless. And I believe we've gotten very comfortable in this country with having a useless faith. Because that's what the devil wants. And That's why I say a faith that costs nothing is worth nothing. And so what does that mean, right? Because we're called to carry our cross. And so the carrying our cross means that we are daily dying. I've worded that a little weird. I don't know why. But carrying the cross means daily dying. It can be dying daily. Go back to 9:23. Then he said to the crowd, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way. Take up your cross daily. So to us, when we think take up our cross, a lot of times we think of a little thing we wear. You know, we've got them I got one on my wrist right here, right? It's a reminder of what Christ did. What Jesus is telling them, they understood under the Roman rule, one of the main ways of being killed was crucifixion. And if you saw someone carrying a cross, you knew that person was going to die. It wasn't they might die or they're going to have a bad day. It was you knew that they were going to die. And so Jesus here is saying that you've got to be able to, if you want to be my follower, if you want to be my disciple, then you have to get up every day and take this cross with you, understanding what you're sacrificing to follow. In John 6, he says this to them, and he teaches to them some hard things. And many of the disciples says, this is very hard to understand. How can anyone accept it? Because they knew what he was saying. And if we understood what he was saying, I wonder how many of us would truly accept it. He goes on. Jesus was aware that his disciples were complaining, so he said to them, does this offend you? Then what will you think if you see the Son of Man ascend to heaven again? The Spirit alone gives eternal life. Human effort accomplishes nothing, and the very words I have spoken to you are spirit and life. But some of you don't believe me, for Jesus knew from the beginning which ones didn't believe and knew who would betray him. Then he said, this is why I said that people can't come to me unless the Father gives them to me. At this point, many of his disciples turned away and deserted him. Then Jesus turned to the 12 and asked, Are you also going to leave? You got to love Simon Peter. He usually has the wrong answer, but this one he had the right one. Simon Peter replied, Lord, to whom would we go? You have the words that give eternal life. We believe and we know you are the Holy One of God. And then in Galatians 2:20, my old self has been sacrificed with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. So I live in the earthly body by trusting in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself. Jesus knows that the message that he teaches, the message that he preaches, is going to be hard for people to understand or accept, if we truly accept what it is to be a Christian. We have sacrificed. We have been crucified with Christ. We no longer occupy this body. It is Christ, and we should be doing what he has called us to do. Christ lives in us. So are you daily picking up your cross? And so I'm going to do something. I'm going to show y'all my daily activity for the most part. And we're going to see am I really living for Christ on a daily basis? And so here's what I'm going to do. I want y'all to get your phones out. Probably don't hear that very often in church, right? Everyone get your phones out. And if you have an Android, I forget what it's called. I'll remember here in a second. Well, here, I'll just go ahead. I don't know how many of y'all can read that. But this is my last week on my phone. And on the Android, you can, it's called digital well-being. On the iPhone, it's called screen time. Pull that up and tell me what does yours look like. Well, you don't have to tell me. I'm not going to I'm not going to call anyone out. But this is mine. And so I said I was going to stomp on my own feet, and this is what I'm doing. I'm stomping on them hard. I have averaged this last week 8 hours a day on my phone. Anyone want to beat that? I hope not. Huh? Okay. Grandpa, you need some help with that? Yeah. Here's what I want you to look at. My total time on my phone this past week, was 57 hours. That's more than I worked this week. By a lot. By a lot. Now, I'll be honest, I went back and honestly, it doesn't look much better. I was going to try to defend myself and say, well, I've been watching a lot of news, looking up a lot of things because of everything that's going on. I can't use that excuse because there's 1 week I averaged 11 hours a day. I don't know how I even did that. And so, but here's the thing. Look at the top 3 for me. They're all social media. I can't read it from this screen. 10 hours on Instagram, 8 hours on Facebook, and 8 hours on X. I did spend 2 hours in Proclaim, but that's just this app right here. Well, I am sometimes. But I'll be honest with you. I would say about less than 30 minutes is that of posting about God. Thank you for trying. Thank you for trying to help me. What's the last in that? I spent an hour and 21 minutes in the Bible app. And that's where I read. Well, in my defense, I do use some software on the computer where I do a lot of my studying and stuff out of. But I use the Bible for my main reading. I don't know how, 100% to the minute. Yeah, well, it does. Yeah, so if you're going today, you have to scroll down and hit previous week. So yeah, if you're going by today's, you might have only been on your phone of an average of 14 minutes by today. Yeah. And look, I'm not saying that social media is bad. There's a lot of good things that we can do through, what's just pointed out, right? My total screen time was 57 hours and 38 minutes last week. Okay. Anyone else want to share? Yeah. Now, if it's YouTube's open. No, I'm just kidding. But this should be the other way around. I mean, what can I do with 60 hours for Christ in a week? I mean, it takes me 25 minutes to get down here. I mean, I'm supposed to be the pastor of this community, right? Of this church. I'm supposed to be trying to bring people to Jesus. I'm supposed to be teaching and shepherding people. I'm going to be honest with you, most of that time. Now, I'm not saying that a lot of that stuff that I watch on there isn't Christian content and learning. Some of it's not, right? Some of it's got cuss words in it that I shouldn't be watching. I'm being honest. And so what am I giving up? What am I doing? What am I carrying? What cross am I carrying? I'm not carrying a cross. I spent an hour and 21 minutes in the Bible app last week. And I was able to spend 30 hours watching videos for the most part on social media somewhere. And X was mainly news stuff. you know? But how many of ours looks like that? Yeah. I don't know about 60 hours up here. That'd be a lot. I'd probably get fired. But I don't know, maybe that's the sacrifice I'm supposed to. And Helen's probably thinking, oh my gosh, she's going to get me. No. But, yeah. Yeah. But, yeah, the point I'm trying to make is of that 60 hours, there's a whole lot of time in there that I could have been doing something I was supposed to be doing for Christ. You know, I go back, and we don't have a daily, you know, basically, what did Paul's life look like every single day, right? As an example, what did Christ's life look like, at least in his ministry, every single day? But I would say more than likely, every single day, Paul was trying to convert someone to Christ. Every single day. Now, he may have taken one day off a week, right? Maybe he followed the Sabbath, I don't know. But even then, I got a feeling he was still trying to convert people to Christ. And so that idea of carrying the cross daily, I'm not carrying a cross because I got a phone in my hand. Right? Christ. Yeah. Yeah. And that's that, but where do we find that balance? And I'll be honest, this is one of those things I'm struggling with in questioning. Like, because we know Paul was a tent maker too, right? So he didn't spend all his time talking about you. Oh, maybe he did. Maybe while he was making tents, he was multitasking. And that's where, like, and this is where I'm like I've talked about, right? And my job, right? I have to have a job. Right? I have to go to work and support my family. And so that takes, well, I'm in IT, so like 35, no, I'm just kidding. 40 hours a week. We all have to support our jobs. But, 5 of them, pretty much, yeah. But what are we doing at our jobs? Am I accepting the fact that corporate says I'm not allowed to, or that I really can't talk about Christ while I'm there? Am I accepting that and saying, yeah, you know what, it's okay. I need to keep my job. Yeah. Well, some of those, I'll be honest with you, and if are at work too, right? And so what does this carrying the cross look like? What does it truly look like when we're doing it? What does it look like at work? You know what? Maybe we need to be the weirdos that talk about Christ all the time. And I'm not talking about in a crazy, every single conversation's off. Paul didn't do that. None of Jesus didn't do that, right? Jesus took time to have fun, and we see that. But I do think that we are taking the easy road when it comes to it. When he says carrying the cross, that means that you daily, especially to his disciples and the followers that he was talking to there, that you daily, every single day, you be prepared to die for your faith. Yeah. No, we're not. We're not suicidal, right? Right. It's not looking for this. It's the way you follow Christ, the way that is going to lead you to the point to where someone's going to want to kill you. Right? And I don't mean that because you're being mean, because you're being hateful. It's because you're telling the truth. And like we've learned this week, telling the truth sometimes can get you killed. Jesus was an example of that. I'm going to come to you, but since I just made that point, I want to do this. Let's look at the followers of Christ. They told the truth, right? In a time where telling the truth was not popular. And if I'm being honest, we live in a time now where telling the truth is not popular. Yeah. Peter was crucified upside down. Now, again, these are through church tradition, church history. Only a couple of these are in the Bible, so we got to take them for that. but this has come from a long line of church history, and I don't think these are made up, so we can take it for what we saw are. James was beheaded in Jerusalem. John, the son of Zebedee, he is the only one who was not martyred, who was not killed. He died naturally in Ephesus. John's the only one. Philip was martyred, crucified or stoned. Bartholomew was flayed alive. Then he was beheaded. Matthew was martyred in Ethiopia. He was either stabbed or beheaded. Thomas was speared to death in India. James was stoned and clubbed in Jerusalem. Thaddeus was clubbed or axed in Syria or Persia. Simon the Zealot was martyred. He was either crucified or killed in Persia and Syria. Matthias was stoned and beheaded in Jerusalem. Paul was beheaded in Rome under Nero. James, the brother of Jesus, was stoned and clubbed in Jerusalem. Mark was martyred in Alexandria, Egypt. He was dragged through the streets. Luke, I didn't know this one, was martyred in Greece. He was hanged. Barnabas was martyred in Cyprus. And Timothy was martyred in Ephesus. He was beaten and stoned. And if you've been following along with us as we go through the book of Ephesus, that was where Timothy was when Paul wrote the books of Timothy. And then the last one, who was the first, was Stephen. And he was stoned in Jerusalem, and we saw that in Acts 7. And what's interesting about that was Paul was there, who was later martyred for Christ, was there and condoned it. How many of us are willing to have this type of faith in Christ? Amber. It's okay. Exactly. It's okay. Okay. Anything else? Or no? I think that's a wonderful point, and I to go to what Kyle asked about that. But the big one is willing to lay down our lives, like she said. These people, all these martyrs, they laid down their lives long before they were actually killed for it. All right, and it is a dying to self too. It's not just willing to die, right? To be killed for our faith, but it is dying to ourselves. And I'll be honest with you, like I'm like Amber. It's like, oh well, there's all these things that I need to pursue. You know, there's all these things I need to do. There's all these things I need to build or buy or whatever. And not a single, like almost all of these, all the New Testament leaders and a lot of the New Testament people we see, like most of them didn't even have homes. And we'll say, well, you can't do that today. Probably back then they'd been like, well, you're crazy for doing it. You're just walking around and hoping the church is going to take care of you. No, I get it. Now, like it's not right, and I'm going to talk about that again. We all have our gifting. we all have our areas of being able to we obviously, they have homes, right? Part of being an elder in the early church was that you were willing to have people in your home. So I'm not saying you shouldn't have homes and we should just give up and be nomads and wander around. But there was a giving up component. Like some of these guys sacrificed their homes, their time, their entire lives. Others gave up a lot. There was something that they truly sacrificed. It wasn't just an inconvenient to be a Christian. They truly sacrificed. They truly gave. And so that's where I want to ask is like, what does that look like for us? And I'm still asking the question because I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know 100%. But I do think it goes to the point of us becoming bold and speaking the truth and reaching people for Christ, really reaching people for Christ. And going, and I think there will be consequences when you start that. That's whenever you understand what the sacrifice is going to be, what the cost is going to be, right? Because I think sometimes, even though we got to count the cost, like sometimes I don't know if we truly know exactly what all it is going to be, but we know that there's going to be some cost. And so when we die to self, dying to self is a cost. Right? It's like I'm not going to do the things that I want to do. I'm going to do the things that God has called me to do. Sorry, Kyle, I don't mean to just keep staring at you the whole time, probably making you uncomfortable. But yeah. And so, but here's the wonderful thing with this. And I'm sorry if I've been, no, I'm not. I'm being harsh. I'm being harsh to myself. But here's the wonderful, wonderful thing about this. The cost brings the greatest reward. If I can get that out right. No matter what it costs. It cost Charlie Kirk his life. In the end, right, his faith and what he taught, someone shot him for because they didn't agree with it. Whether you agree with it or not, that's no one. I don't care. Someone on the left who I think's completely wrong. They don't deserve to die. No one deserves to die. But the Bible lets us know that that's going to happen. Matthew 16, verse 25 and 26. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. And this is getting back to kind of what Amber and Kyle were talking about. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And that's what that carrying that cross is you are giving up your life in order to save it. They can do a lot of horrible things to us here on this earth. The minute we pass away, man, we're going to forget all about it. It's going to be a distant memory. Oh yeah, that kind of stung a little bit. Huh? I don't know if we will or not. The only reason I think maybe sometimes we will is maybe to make heaven that much better. But other than that, I don't know. I don't know. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? Philippians 3, verses 7 and 8. I once thought these things were valuable, but now I consider them worthless because of what Christ has done. How many of us are still holding on to these things that are worthless? I like that he kind of rewords it this. Yes, everything else is worthless when compared with the infinite value of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord. For his sake, I have discarded everything else. Count it all what? The literal translation, and for some reason, all the Bibles, they clean this up a little bit. I've discarded everything else, counting it all as garbage. The literal translation is dung, manure, feces. I could use some other words, but we're in church, so I won't. So that I could gain Christ. And so I wonder how many of us do we consider all these things besides Christ dung? Whatever, Doesn't matter what house I live in. It doesn't matter what car I drive. It doesn't matter what. Go on and on and on and on. Right? Am I following Christ? Romans 8:17. And since we are his children, we are his heirs. In fact, together with Christ, we are heirs of God's glory. But if we are to share in his glory, we must what? Share in his suffering. That's all wonderful until you get to that last part. Well, what was the suffering that Christ had? He suffered the worst type of death you can experience. People have studied, scholars have studied crucifixion, and to this day it is still one of the most torturous ways to kill someone. But beyond that, he took every single sin of this world on himself. And he was disconnected from the Father. He is God, and he was disconnected from God. So imagine the suffering that he went through. And this is another one. I think this one speaks a little bit more maybe on our level. Mark 10:28-30 says, Then Peter began to speak up. We've given you up everything to follow you. All right, Peter, putting his foot in his mouth. Have you really? And Peter said to them, Yes. And I assure you that everyone who gives up house or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or property for my sake in the good news will what? Will now receive in return 100 times as many houses, brothers, sisters, mothers, children, and property, along with what? Persecution. He's real good at throwing that always at the end. It's like, oh, you're going to get one of those. Oh, yeah, and you're going to suffer too. But you're going to get 100 times what you had before. And in the world to come, that person will have what? Eternal life. So what are we, just as Jesus is telling them, it's like, yeah, you're going to have to give up your house. You're going to have to give up your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, your children, your property, for my sake and the sake of the good news. Now, like a lot of people mention, more than likely, in today's day and age, in America, you don't have to give up a lot of those things. But if you truly started following Christ the way we're called to follow Christ, what would you have to give up? What would you have to sacrifice? There's a lot of little things, Kyle talked about that we have to give up. But what do you have to sacrifice? What do you have to give up to make sure that other people, not only yourself, but that you are bringing other people to Christ? Because that's what disciples are. The disciples make disciples. Disciples aren't just followers. Right? Jesus talks about being followers of Christ, but one of his last words to them was, you go and make more of yourself. It's going to be sacrificial. It's going to cost you something. Make sure you count it, but go and make more. And make sure they understand. Man, the reward is eternal life with God. And I'm telling you, you could burn everything I have, get rid of everything. Job just turned me into Job, and Job understood that. Still got God. He lost everything. Sitting in dirt with boils all over him. And that was his faith. That's what his faith cost him. So the reward there is great. And so I finished this with, I want you all to ask these same questions. And again, these are the questions I've been asking myself. We saw someone's life snuffed out in an instant this week. The unfortunate thing is this has happened all over the world, really. We don't hear about it a lot. Not on the news. And it's not to downplay what happened to Charlie. But there are people in other countries losing their lives every single day. for their faith. And so I'm wondering if we can be that bold. Can we be bold enough to get rid of the things that are keeping us from following Christ and truly being a disciple of His and truly bringing others to Christ? What does that look like for you? You know, one of the things we've been talking about the last few weeks is your gift and your gifting. You know, and it kind of goes to what Adam said, right? If everyone's gifting was to sell their house and move on, you know, and be nomads, then yeah, the world would fall apart, right? We all have our gifts. We all have our calling. And so we need to lean into that and to pray for that, for God to show you, what is it I need to give up? It may be multiple things. Me, it's a lot. I've got a lot of distractions where I should be focused on Christ and what I'm supposed to be doing. And again, like I said, it doesn't mean we 24/7 just go. We would burn out. Even Christ Himself several times left His ministry for a day. Well, I say a day, for a little while, and went off to be by Himself. Yeah, 40 days, right? When He first kicked off His ministry, He went for 40 days. And so we need to rest. We need to, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's why Sabbaths are good things. And so that's my message. It's what I've been thinking about. And it's my call. Is to, what is a faith that I know deep in my heart I've been called to do what I'm doing here. I know that. So what does that look like for me to fulfill? What is it going to cost me to make sure that I do? And I'm not talking about, you know, it costs you some friendships or it costs you some, you know, some extra hours, you know, at night, or it you know, it costs you some people saying bad things about you. Oh, well, I made a big deal, or I felt like it was a big deal. The more I look at it, it's silly. And so it's time to move on. It's time to go full head into what Christ has called me to do. And so that's my call for you all. What is it you've been called to do? What is it Christ has called you? Who is it Christ has called you to be? So I think it looks different for each one of us. But whatever that is, lean into it. Lean into it 100%. Give up whatever it takes to do that and do it. Sacrifice. And so what I'm going to do here, I'm not even going to play any music because I want us to have a moment of silence for a lot of the whole country, really. But I want you to think, one of the things I'm doing is I'm rededicating myself to God. I'm rededicating myself to the Lord. And I encourage everyone else to do that. I encourage everyone else to do the same. Whether you know, some of you may be like, man, I've done all this. I've given up a lot. No, that's good. Let's rededicate anyways. But I want you to take the time to think about that. And you might not have the answer today. The answer may come to you a month from now, maybe it'll come a year from now. But if you were pursuing God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, then He's going to show you what He wants you to do. He's going to show you the Christian that He wants you to be. And He's going to allow you to have the impact on the people you're supposed to have the impact on, to bring them to Christ. Like I said, I think that's going to look different for all of us. So what I'm going to do, like I said, I am rededicating myself to Christ. I'm rededicating to my work, to what I'm supposed to be doing here, to my family, my friends, to all that. I encourage you to do the same. You don't have to get up and come up here. If you don't want to, that's fine. We can do it all just sitting here. We're in a small enough room. But I want you to take time just to have a moment of silence to think about that, to pray for this country. And then, Amber, whenever you feel ready, close us out in prayer.